Oh, what, Matt, you have to stay the whole way through. If you stay, it's probably more hungry. It's chicken.
This is food for the board members.
It's just allergies.
I've heard that before.
Two in a row is allergies.
Likely. Actually, we're good. How you doing, Joyce?
Get this one over in
How you doing?
That might be Mr. Rice's.
No, they're not heels. I'll stand up.
You need a seat, sir, because I can sit over there.
No, you fine. You fine.
Huh? Otherwise, it's not like that.
I'm looking to you. You want to be at the table there? So, I don't have to. So it's the fire marshal.
I cannot answer. Get American. Cycle of knowledge where every time I felt bad, they put Yes, it's water.
No, we can't act.
But we're not required.
Right, it's just
We want you to know that we will put all
I'll make sure he we're not going to do separate. Thank you so much.
that way.
I call to order the Asheville City Board of Education work session. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our work session. Before we get started, I'd like to have a motion to amend the agenda to add donations, please.
I'm going to amend the agenda to add donations.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So moved. Next on our agenda, we have our Board of Education reminders.
The parent safety forum will take place tomorrow night at Asheville Middle School. We are combining it with the homework diner. The homework diner will begin at 5, and our forum will begin at 6 o'clock until 7 o'clock. We just want to meet with parents to share any updates that we have around safety, and certainly give them some additional information around that counseling piece, that mental health, social, emotional piece for our students. And again, at Asheville Middle School tomorrow night at 6 o'clock until 7 o'clock p.m. will be the parent safety forum.
Okay. Next, we have our construction update with Dr. McAllister.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to have a construction update. We are going to give an overview of all the construction projects. TJ is going to do that from Benoit. He's going to hold the Asheville High School until the end because we have other conversations. I'm sure questions can come up about that, so we're going to hold that to the end. But prior to TJ giving that overview, we're going to ask that everybody's here from construction just give us your name and your title so everybody's familiar with who we have. So we can start with Craig.
Greg Israel, Buncombe County.
Jim Young, Benoit Construction.
Ryan Walker, Benoit Construction.
TJ Hollers with Benoit Construction.
Clint Shepherd, Buncombe County.
Don Samuel, City Schools.
Dane Peterson, Buncombe County.
Terry Leduc, Reliant Environmental.
Asheville City Schools, Walter Bell.
We appreciate you all being here today. TJ, you want to give us an overview? I appreciate it.
Sure. So with that said, we'll start with the Montford North Star Academy. Currently, phase 1 project, we're roughly about 89% complete as of the end of February. And for phase 2 work, we're about 59% complete currently. The work is progressing well. We've got the labs, we've got all the casework installed. We're finishing trimming those out, installing light fixtures, finishing flooring, and getting ready to punch those rooms this month. Hopefully turn those over. The bathroom renovations, those are also going well. We just finished the last of the larger girls' game bathroom, and we've got 3 other smaller single restrooms to do. Finishing up a few items as far as punch list goes and corridor work. Getting that finished up over the next week and a half. And we'll get started on those last 3 bathrooms. We did set the rooftop unit and the chiller at Montford this past weekend. That worked as well. Still finished tying those up and getting those complete. And the elevator is currently getting installed there as well. Should be done this week. And we'll start finishing all the drywall and other parts and pieces to that work. The storm drainage work around Montford is installed and complete. We are still finalizing some seating and dress elements. The weather lets us. That's really it for Montford. Ira B. Jones, again, the phase 1 work, which was the roof is 100% done. The phase 2 work, we are currently set up to begin that work on March 19th. Basically just pushed it off so that we would not interfere with the heating season for the school and less of an interruption. Back to the high school. The phase 1 work at the high school, which is all the stone veneer. So you'll see every month it kind of tracks slowly as far as the percent complete, but it's 52% complete as far as an entire package. Phase 2 is approximately 69% complete. And phase 3 work, we're just getting started with that, so maybe 1 or 2%. And part of that work, the stone restoration, the auditorium is complete as far as the stone restoration, we're on the punch list there. On the south wing, we're about 60% complete. And we're getting set up for our next scaffold move to start next week, which will take probably through the end of this month, because part of that contains the rotunda. So we'll actually put scaffold on that rotunda and it'll stay there through the summer. That work will take some time. Also, the front entry and the stoop, as soon as school's out, we'll go to that area and we'll tuck point that entire front entry. So the front entry will be shut down just for the summer. Seems to be the best time to get it done. The scaffold on the old gym, will also, as part of the next move, we'll start scaffolding the old gym as well. The membrane roofing, everything is complete with exception of the high roof over the science wing and the area below the rotunda. Of course, we'll finish all the stone tuck pointing before we replace that roof. And the tile roof, again, all the tile roof currently is on, that's the old building, the tile roof, with the exception of the science wing. And they did get started on the science wing. We started tearing off the tile, actually about last weekend. One half of that, and we're in there today starting to build temporary walls and enclosures so we can shut down one whole half. So we can take off that roof structure and put it back on in the next 2 months. All right, the CTE building. I think that's the conversation, of course, but obviously.
Before we go there, TJ, will you update us on the demolition of the vocational building? We did receive funding for that.
Yes, we received funding for that, and currently the design team is underway working on documents for pricing up and getting that work complete as far as demolition.
We also got some design money in there, for schematic designs for whatever building that we think will fit right best in our investment needs and stuff.
And he means ROTC building. Just for you all that don't know.
Does it have to be the exact number of rooms, the exact number of floors? Do we need any leeway on any additions or anything like that?
In my opinion, it's going to be a harder sell to go back with a much larger square footage building, but the whole thing is the sale. You know, what's going in that building, and that'll justify if we have to add, a little square footage to it, or the room designs.
So if there were classrooms in there, like we do anticipate classrooms, but what would be the maximum number of classrooms do you think?
I can tell you right off the top of my head. We need to go to the architects, which, like I said, we're funding for, and they'll give us a.
Okay.
Have you chosen architects already?
We have the architectural team in place for Asheville High School. And we got the price of $32,000 to go schematic design based on the fact that they're there. They've already got the entire campus layout, and it's just a matter of plugging them right in. And there's no learning curve, so that's what made the most sense at the time.
All right, and then the CTE building, of course, the windows, they're currently on hold. Obviously, pending, last week we found out that lead was present last Monday morning. And then we called Terry Leduc's firm. They came out and tested it, and we got confirmation back that Tuesday afternoon. And confirmed that there was lead in those metal frames. And with that, 4 of the 9 rooms that we replaced windows in needed to be, his report basically stated that all 9 rooms that we had replaced windows in needed to be cleaned, OSHA certified lead folks that clean those buildings. So in this case, it's DH Griffin that's doing that work for us. So, long story short, as soon as we found out there was an issue on Monday morning, right away, we got on the phone with all the powers that be, got Terry's group, Reliant, up there to do the official testing, and even expediting that testing, the fastest it could be turned around was at about 2 o'clock on Tuesday. And then it was, at that point, it was recommended that all those rooms be completely sanitized, which, as that process, as soon as we learned that information, we went to the contractor and got them on board, and they started the first round of that and cleaned 4 classrooms this weekend, over the entire weekend. And Terry's folks jumped in, Reliant came out and tested those again this morning. So we're hoping to get test results back tomorrow afternoon. We cannot test them over the weekend, there's no way to test them, so that's why it's moving this testing.
So the difference between the 9 and the 4 is that you're running 4 rooms that cross the threshold of that required
Yeah.
cleaning, but we went above that and started cleaning on 9. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell us what you mean by met the threshold?
I think that you'll want Terry to answer that
Oh,
question.
okay.
We're using the HUD threshold, which is on window sills.
Okay, you can stand up if you like, or you can, that's fine, that's fine right there, okay.
We're using the HUD threshold, which is the most stringent threshold available in the regulations concerning lead paint. And for the window sills, it's 250 micrograms per square foot.
And in layman's terms, that means,
Well, that's the amount of lead on a square foot on a surface on a window sill. So the lab, what we do is we do a wipe test, and then the lab does a analysis of that wipe, and they determine how much lead was on that wipe. So that's actual lead coming off that surface, which, you know, is a combination of maybe some small paint chips, things such as that nature.
So those were the levels, is that correct, is that what you're saying? Those are the levels?
Yes, that's the lead levels. Now, as TJ was saying, out of the 9 rooms we tested, 4 were above that threshold of 250 micrograms per square foot.
And what are the risk factors, if any, with those levels? Are there any risk factors associated with having 250 micrograms per square foot?
I think, you know, in my opinion, and, you know, we've been involved in a lot of lead paint projects, large projects to small projects to cleanups. Based on what was done there, just removing the windows, I think there's very limited risk. There's some paint chips that have fallen off when the windows were taken out, and it appears to us that the contamination is just really related mainly to the window sills and maybe the areas directly at the windows. So I think it's very limited.
So do you think we followed all of our safety procedures that were in place to handle all of that? Your men or your folks who handle that?
Well, I think we're going to implement some additional measures that I think need to be taken
Okay.
for the ongoing process, and that's going to be using some engineering controls to try to better control the dust and the chips, and then also some cleanup measures, you know, after the windows are taken out, and that'll basically eliminate any, you know, further contamination to the window sills or areas directly, you know, under the windows.
I'd also ask TJ that we test these rooms prior to us going in and doing it. Because I want to set a baseline, you know, is there any contamination on that window sill before we get there? And after we come out and clean up, what's the levels now?
So, and Terry is going to check all the rooms. He's been given a directive, all the rest of the rooms in the CTE building is gonna be checked. They're starting at about 5:30 tonight. He will check the remaining rooms as they are. And then that will give a baseline of where we are with those rooms. And then once the windows go in, they'll be checked. Once the clearance is done, and then we'll have that compared to. So not only is he checking the windows in other rooms that will further get windows, he is going to go ahead and check every room in that building today.
And so this really shouldn't cause a disruption. What we have now is an unforeseen condition that came to us. We had to react to it. So now we're getting it on front end. We're gonna check them before they go in there, and check them as they come out. And it should just be a seamless process from this point forward. If Terry's tests show, okay, you've still got a problem in this room, then we would say, no, you can't have this room back until we come in and abate it and get it cleaned up and get it ready for students.
Why did we miss it on the front end? Because we were told you tested prior to taking the windows out. Why didn't it show up then?
I'll let PJ speak to that since you haven't tested.
Well, ultimately, we took the test results that are given to us as part of the contract documents. We're not a testing agency. We took the reports that we were given at the time.
So the reports were done by another agency, and then those reports were just shared. And I think it was a report that someone that they used in the past.
Yeah, there was another environmental company did it, but I think everything went through Greg as far as his response and all that stuff when those came back. So I don't know how that was all done on that side, so you might want to speak to that.
Ultimately, any and all the test reports that we got from the school system, and they were incorporated into the contract documents. So before Monday of last week, the 26th, we had no knowledge of lead in the area we were working in that building.
So no one physically went and took the test prior to taking the windows out? Your agency or the environmental specialist didn't do that? Or you just used what we had on file already? Is that what you think?
Correct.
So
They
the
wanted
company,
Ray Woodcock check.
Part of his test results, he had a comprehensive test for that
But,
building.
I mean, that's my
Ultimately,
point,
what
that
what he
came through
tested.
y'all.
No, sir.
But when
Well,
it
it did not.
ended, well, I don't know who it came to, but I don't know who, if you do Woodcock, who,
Well, I didn't do anything. So
I
what I'm
understand that,
saying
but it's just
is
got
that
your name
it
on
went
it.
through the contract, it went through through Benoit's contract. And if Benoit gathered, what I'm kind of hearing is if Benoit gathered information from Asheville City Schools that said that there was no known lead in that area, then I'm assuming you didn't go to Ray Woodcock and say, here, test further in these areas. You just proceeded with a knowledge of no lead that was known to you.
That is correct.
And this is not that uncommon in older buildings. I mean, anytime we open a wall, the thing I focus on here is what was the response. Anytime we open a wall, when we redid the courthouse, you don't know what's behind that wall. And, once it becomes known, it's more the response afterwards. How do you abate what you found and what's your steps going forward? So, we may find who knows what next week.
so that's my question. What other possible problems? Could we have mold? Could we have asbestos? Could we have?
Until you break that seal, you don't know what's behind anything. It's how you address it once you find it.
Okay, so what's the best way of us making sure that we are aware of what's there before we put students in?
There's not really, unless you do just a lot of destructive testing, there's not really a way to know what's behind anything.
So, what I'm hearing is that the previous tests that we've done didn't say there was any lead.
That's correct.
So, before the windows were taken out, the students and teachers were not at any kind of
Well,
lead
it's,
exposure?
well, what we're getting is, there's no known risk. You know, to say that they were not at risk, I can't say that because, you know, all we received was there's no known hazardous materials in these areas.
And so we should have copies of those reports from Jim.
Y'all have any, they have any back there? Do they have any of those reports from
Well,
last
we
year?
have to get the report done about the test because it was in.
Right here, I have it when he did it, and it went to UTJ June 8th, 2017. TJ Hollers copied Tim Holcomb. Here's the lab report on the panels under the windows, the caulk samples, all positive. This is about asbestos. The paint samples are at a different lab, and we should have them later today. I'm not sure what paint. My assumption was at that point, that Ray Woodcock, that went to you. So, when I saw those, that would have been my assumption, that was in my file.
And I'm not sure what.
Yeah, let me suggest one thing, because with work session, obviously this needs to be looked into, so we can do that. We'll give copies of all the reports and other things. The other thing we don't know, is I think we need to find out, is was the lead paint taxable? A lot of times you've got lead paint that's 30, 40 years old and it's been painted. So it doesn't get disturbed until somebody removes a window. So there's more questions than there are answers. So I would just suggest you go on with the work session and let your staff cooperate with Greg and his folks and get some answers to some of these. That would be a better use of time at this point because we just don't have the answers right in front of us. I agree. Yeah.
So what do we communicate to families that
I
have?
think we communicated to families appropriately. What we need to tell families is that there will be testing prior to any work and testing done after any work to ensure that there's.
I think the thing you need to,
That's all fair.
I think the thing you need to get them to understand is that we're talking about 4 classrooms. You know, and I see a larger thing from the emails I see going around. I see a larger thing, you know, school-wide in these emails. But all we're addressing is where we found lead in 4 classrooms and the method with which it was abated and you know, an expeditious way that it came. That's all we can handle from our end. As far as what's actually in that school, totally, I don't know.
Right.
And neither would I.
So from our end, we communicated to families. We met with the teachers on the 28th. We sent a letter home on the 28th. We sent another letter home with an update on March the 2nd. The high school also did a Connect Ed call to parents, making them aware to ensure that if they didn't get the letter, that they would contact you through the phone. So from Asheville City Schools perspective, I think we communicated it as effectively as we can up to this point with the information that we had.
Yeah, I just want us to make sure that we continue to communicate and keep families updated. So I don't want it to just stop right here. I want us to continue to communicate that we're working on it, that we're looking at it, and that we're being proactive to inform families. Because if we stop right now and something else bigger comes out of it, it can be a lot of big issue. I want to be more as transparent about this as possible.
And once again, are there other tests that we should be doing now?
I've already asked Terry, he's getting me the results of the first radon test that we did, but I've asked him to do a second radon test. This is Asheville City Schools asking this. A second radon test. Once this is over, we will do air quality testing throughout that entire building. That way, anything that is within that air will be detected, and that will include everything from mold to any other thing that would be affecting anyone's health.
Okay, and that makes me feel better.
Yeah, I just think we need to communicate that the more testing we'll go through,
Yeah.
that we care about our staff, our faculty, our teachers, and our kids' health and safety. And so we want to be as transparent with this as we can. And so we're trying to be in front of it by communicating as best as possible.
And before we move on, I do want to thank Walt again
Yes.
for noticing that there was an issue with the windows and the lead has had not detected that. It's been a little worse, so thank you so much, we appreciate that. Thank you.
And if I can, I just appreciate everybody working really hard to try and fix this, providing as much information and coming out and sharing what you know so far and what the plans are going forward.
That'll beat us, we're gonna step out.
Next on our agenda, we have
Good afternoon, Board, Madam Chair. Going to take a few moments this afternoon to update you on our work with equity in the district. So ICS, our work with Integrated Comprehensive Systems, our school teams have been working through the modules and making good progress. Colleen and Elise were actually with us all day today. We pulled in all of the school leadership teams together here this morning, and they spent about 3 hours sharing with each other what they're doing, different strategies that they're layering into the work to make it more meaningful for their school staffs. The district team is going to continue to work through those modules as well. Today with Colleen and Elise, we discussed the need to assign one of us to each school ICS team so that somebody's there to support that work in the school. We'll be working on our equity non-negotiables in May. You'll be hearing a lot more about that because those will come to the board. And then once those are established, they'll become the guideposts for the district from everything from policy to classroom practice moving forward. So that work's going really well. It's hard. It's staff are at a point with this work that they're really having to look at themselves and their mindsets and their practices. But we feel good about moving in the right direction, and so that's ICS. Equity talking points, I think at our last meeting we shared these with you. Ashley and Michelle did a fantastic job of putting these together for parents in the community to update folks on where we are. And on the back, we also included what different stakeholders can help us do with the work. Choosing equity, that's our series of community conversations. We've had 2 so far. Thank you for attending. They've gone really well. We've had great turnouts. The next one is March 22nd at Vance Elementary. It's at 6 p.m. And that session will focus on what we're doing in the school district, what the schools are doing.
And they are doing that in conjunction with the foundation, and they're not doing it themselves, is that correct?
That is correct.
I thought it was interesting what you said, their mindset along with their classroom practice. That's a very interesting thing, you know.
Do you want to elaborate, Ms. Griffin?
please do.
Well, you know, I think we have to make sure that they really know what their mindset is as it relates to their classroom practice. Because sometimes we think we know, and we don't. And we think we're doing one thing, but we're doing another that's not effective.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess you all are going to continue, okay, so you can kind of monitor how this is going.
Absolutely. And today with Colleen and Elise, we talked about all the work in Cornerstone 1 this year with ICS is they talk about it as the why and the why behind the what. And that when we start to realign our classrooms and our resources and implement the instruction that we know works for all students, teachers and administrators and district staff are much more on board when they understand the why behind that. How did we get to this point in education where we are? What are our mindsets? What are our biases? What is deficit versus asset? So that's really the focus of the work this year.
Okay.
And on March 22nd at the event at Vance, which yes, that's a partnership between the foundation and the school district, that March 22nd, we're gonna break out into groups, which will be facilitated by members of school equity teams. And they're actually gonna run the community folks who attend through a couple of the activities that we do in the ICS modules. And we're gonna, that evening, focus on the asset and deficit work that we've been doing, how to look at students and look at each other through an asset lens and not a deficit lens.
So what is the time?
6 o'clock at Vance Elementary. And then the next one after that, the fourth one is April. I'll make sure you get the flyer with the 4 dates. It's in April.
It's April 19th.
April 19th, thank you. And that one's at the Arthur Eddington. And that's going to be really about what parents and families can do and community can do to support the work.
Is that with Dr. Lewis?
No, that's just the fourth in that Choosing Equity series.
Okay.
So then Dr. Chance Lewis from UNC Charlotte has been working, he's the head of urban education. He's been working with the district leaders, so all of the leadership team, all the directors and coordinators, school principals and school assistant principals. And he's working with us around culturally responsive leadership and instruction. So we realized that we needed some very specific tools around working with African American students because our data says that's where our gap is the largest. ICS does work with us around assets and deficits and differentiated instruction, but they're not experts in working with African American students. Dr. Lewis is. That's been the foundation of all of his research. So we're doing a book study with him, an educator's guide to working with African American students. He's done 4 sessions with that group of district and school leaders. We have 2 more sessions planned this spring. And he's also, this last visit, started working with middle school math PLCs at both Montford and Asheville Middle. So we looked at our first NC check-in data and realized that our biggest achievement gap that we're seeing this year was in middle school math. So we identified those areas as a place for him to start his work with teachers. And then we hope next year that he'll do more of that hands-on work with teachers and taking their lessons and redesigning them in culturally responsive ways.
So I'm wondering, with African American students.
Yes, ma'am.
As far as math, you said there, the math is what you need to work on this year. I'm just wondering, is there any discipline that's really causing them not to focus and, be engaged? You see our teachers talking about that? Are they seeing some interference with that?
I want to make sure I understand what you're asking before I respond.
Okay. Some of our African American students have a lot of ability.
Yes, ma'am.
But there are behaviors that cause them not to be able to focus and be engaged in learning. So I'm just wondering whether that was something they were seeing.
Sounds like,
Oh.
sounds like discipline is playing an effect with them being actually in the real.
So we looked at our discipline, Ms. Griffin, and one of the things that we noticed in the patterns were there were gaps in instruction and in sort of free time in between transitions between topics. And so sometimes those were our highest behavior moments. So we felt like that if we would work to encourage to write lesson plans that keep kids engaged and moving and sort of a constant flow to the classroom, we even talked about practicing those transitions between one event to the next and making those as fast as they can be, because engaged students don't have time to be in trouble. And so we felt like that some of our gap was actually from just rethinking how we do class sometimes. And so we had a really good discussion. The last 2 times we've looked at our discipline data, those were both trends that came up.
And continuing to look at when students are being removed because of behavior. So we're trying as much as possible to keep kids in core instruction. Obviously there's times that that can't happen, but we're trying to shift away from removing kids from instruction for minimal disruptions, right? And Dr. Lewis's work is really helping us understand how to design those lessons to engage everyone.
That's what this is my last point,
Yes, ma'am.
is that when I was in some of the schools, I noticed that the lesson plans they varied.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wondered if you ever thought about having I would say this uniform lesson plan.
And lesson plan template.
You see what I'm saying?
We've definitely talked about it. We thought about bringing that in this current school year. We did an informal survey and felt like it might be better to wait a year. Our policy on lesson planning that we actually just reviewed with principals at our last administrative team meeting, it does spell out what has to be in every lesson plan. So even though we don't have a shared template, it does say what has to be in each lesson plan, but we have discussed moving toward a template that everyone would use.
That would be good.
Mhm.
We used to use that and it was very helpful.
Yeah,
And it was, yeah.
So,
And that,
Absolutely, absolutely.
do you want,
just a question about the, I think it was a mid-year, information on math. Is that coming up?
I was going to share a little bit about that with academic achievement. Is that
Then
okay?
I'll just
Okay.
be quiet for a second.
I have one question before you move on. So you said you're looking at when kids are being removed and I guess trying not to remove them when they have the smaller episodes. What supports are currently in place because they are gonna have those episodes and they're not currently engaged. We're trying to we're teaching the teachers or helping our teachers understand that their curriculum needs to be more engaging. So how are we supporting the students until that time?
Well, I think one thing we're doing is wherever they go when they're removed, helping support to make sure that they have access to whatever the instruction or the materials or the core curriculum that they're missing when they're in school suspension or out of school suspension. Other supports, student support, do you want to?
So I know some of our spaces that we have are called turnaround spots, especially those where we have FPS, family preservation services. Those are available. I know when those students are removed and they go into that location, they're still being served in their academic work. In other words, those TAs that are there, part of that mental health TA system that we have employed, they're helping them meet their behavioral need at the moment. Not so much that we're writing up the behavior, but we're trying to get at what's causing the behavior, because a lot of times there's an antecedent to that. So those mental health TAs are helping us do that, and are also helping them get back on track with the work in the turnaround space and getting back into the classroom faster. So that's another strategy that we've employed, especially in our elementaries that we're seeing that is working, especially in our schools that have higher numbers of issues with behavior.
I'm glad to hear that because in the past, those mental health programs, they weren't the best.
Well,
and I hope you all are monitoring those.
So there's FPS and what they provide, and then this is something we've sort of pieced together ourselves to help support that, because there's still some holes that are not there, and we're trying to make sure we hold FPS to the task and what they've said they will do. So it's a work in progress, but it can get better, and it will. But we feel like we've made some progress this year.
How are you supporting teachers currently? Because sometimes teachers can trigger students, not purposely, but which causes the students to continue to go in and out of the classroom. So are we monitoring to see if that could be the case and doing some one-on-one with some teachers?
So we're definitely, when we look at the discipline data, drilling down to the teacher level and seeing who our high flyer teachers are. As you know, we've got CREM staff have been CREM trained in 6 of our 10 schools. The other 4 will be fully CREM trained this summer. So we're looking at how effective is that having an effect in all classrooms, in some classrooms with all teachers, with some teachers. That's one strategy that some staff have said have been very helpful to keep them from being so triggered by students.
Madam Chair, if I might add, we actually had a beginning teacher meeting this last week, and the CREM training was brought up, and one of our beginning teachers actually mentioned using that, and he said it really helped him because he realized some of his reactions were triggering the students, and so employing some of those strategies, he felt like had been beneficial to him at the middle school. So I do think us continuing that work will help us stop some of that off.
What is that? You said CRAM?
Yeah.
Community resiliency model.
Oh, okay.
So staff and students, staff are trained and then they train students to understand, it's basically brain science. What happens to your brain chemistry when you're bumped out of your resiliency zone. So your resiliency zone is the place where you can self-regulate, and when you go out, you flip your lid in brain science. And when staff understand they're moving out of their resiliency zone, they can self-regulate, hopefully, and not flip their lids on students. And then we teach students how to identify when they're in their resiliency zones in an attempt for them not to flip their lid. Vance and Dixon are probably the best two examples if you want to see CREM in practice. You'll see students in those schools talking about their resiliency zones and flipping their lids and what they're doing to try to self-regulate. And we've definitely seen a positive impact on discipline in those buildings. So it's...
So is it like a self-reflection? Okay.
You identify your triggers and the things that trigger you, and the adults have to figure out what bumps them out of their zone and some strategies for when they're out of that zone. And sometimes the staff have to recognize that they have to step away.
Yeah, because I have some more thoughts on that, but I won't go into it right now.
It's sure
Okay.
So, should I go on to academic achievement, or do you?
It's fine, go ahead.
Okay. So, I'm going to highlight some things here, and then, I don't know, maybe in your board retreat, we could do a deeper dive into the mid-year data. We have a lot of it. We're still coming through all of it. But I wanted to highlight a couple of successes from the end of 16-17 to make sure you're aware. Jones and Hall Fletcher Elementary Schools both went from letter grades of C's to letter grades of B's. And they both went from met to exceeding expectations. That's phenomenal. Yay. Hall Fletcher Elementary was actually a D letter grade 2 years before. So in 2 years, Hall Fletcher went from a D to a B. That's extraordinary. I also wanted to point out that in terms of African American students, which continues to be where we have our largest gap, last year Hall Fletcher in 4th grade reading and math had significantly stronger growth and percent proficient for African American students. And 5th grade math at Hall Fletcher last year was the smallest achievement gap that I've seen in this district ever, without compromising the overall percent proficient for all students. So that's a huge positive. I know we hear a lot about the negatives in our data, and we know we have a lot of work to do, but those areas were really positive. Jones and Hall Fletcher 5th grade science for African American students last year was also very strong. Vance last year, African American students in 3rd grade math and in 5th grade reading and math were also strong. So we do have some places where we have classrooms that kids are excited, all kids are excited to be in and engaged, and we're seeing these gains, and so we're looking at where they are and what's happening in those pockets that we can replicate. In terms of our mid-year data, we're starting to dig into that. Our M-class, which is the K through 3rd grade reading assessment, we're from the preliminary analysis we've done, we have some really strong pockets with African American students at Jones and Vance in kindergarten and at Claxton in 2nd grade. So we'll be digging deeper into that mid-year data to see again where are these pockets, what's happening there, and what are the strategies. Areas of growth for us, overall math is a weaker area than reading. And our achievement gap continues to be the #1 issue for us between white and non-white students, but especially between white and African American students. So this is summary, and then we can do a deeper data analysis if you'd like during the board retreat.
Please.
I would. I mean, I think it'd be good to see it based off of school grade in the school. Just to kind of see that information.
Okay, do you want it broken down by subgroup? Like, why, okay,
Yeah, and also the discipline data,
okay.
to see how it kind of mirrors with the achievement data.
And attendance data.
Which is huge.
Bunch of data.
Okay. Do y'all have any questions?
We will for the retreat.
I look forward to it.
Well, and I'd just like to say, I appreciate the continued focus on excellence with equity and the work we're trying to do to work on this achievement guide.
Thank you, Melissa.
Mhm.
We have Melissa again with our June summer school plan.
So I think you have in your folders hard copies of the proposed plan for June summer school. This is an option that the state gives for districts to retest students in areas that they did not pass in the EOG or the EOC. Districts have the option of participating, and districts have the option of creating the plan. But when districts participate, the plan has to be approved by the board. These three plans are identical to what we did last year, and we got some good results. Elementary school would like to run a 5-day program, starting on June 11th, the Monday after school gets out for students. They would remediate Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then administer the end of grade on the 14th and 15th, which is Thursday and Friday. All the transportation is provided, meals are provided, etc. Middle school, both Asheville Middle and Montford would like to run a 2-day program. Last year, the secondary schools did their remediation with students before they left on the last day of school. They did not pull them from any activities like field day. They did it during instructional time, so the students did not miss out. But the secondary students said they were more likely to come if it was shorter. So they brought them back in on the following Monday and Tuesday to re-administer the test. And then the same with a 2-day high school program would run June 11th and 12th. We actually did not have participation last summer in our high school program, so we'll be working this summer to try to get more students involved in that. We've been talking with the high school about some remediation plans. Ian Nelson, our secondary director, is working closely with them to develop some remediation plans. So that's our proposed June summer program. This is not our, in July we run our large comprehensive middle school magic and Read to Achieve reading camp. But this is just the short June retest that the state lets us do.
So what's the success on the secondary, by them going off on a weekend and then coming in and then taking their test on Monday and Tuesday?
So last year in middle school, we had, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but we had a good number of students participate, and we picked up some additional passing scores at Asheville Middle School for the last 2 years. High school students did not participate to come back in that Monday and Tuesday.
I'm trying to get a job at that point.
It's really challenging. Any summer program with high school kids is really challenging
Oh, yeah.
because they do want to work. But we had good participation from middle school. I want to say between 60 and 80 students participated in middle school.
That's good. I was just concerned about the weekend loss, especially using that week before doing instruction time, how much loss do they have? I said, like, well, last day of school.
Mhm.
And then their brains kind of click off Saturday and Sunday. And then could click back on Monday to take the test. But it sounds like it worked, so.
Thank you.
Next, we have Chris Campbell and John Henning with the quick claim conveyance of Montford property to Buncombe County.
Right, the primary purpose of this is financing. As we all know, North Star Academy is being used as collateral. The county is borrowing the money to do the work at North Star, to do the work at Jones, and to do the work at Asheville High School. Then ancient history tells us that in 1951, the General Assembly told the county of Buncombe to convey any property it had within the city administrative unit to the city schools. That was done 8 years later in a single deed, but in doing the title work, the county discovered that there are some out parcels, some additional land at North Star that was never officially conveyed. So this is real simple. The county schools last week voted to quit claim anything left to you, and tonight on your consent agenda, you're then conveying that to the county as part of the collateral on the debt. Once the debt is paid off, you will get title to your properties back. Anytime we convey property to the county as collateral, we get a lease agreement with the county. So it's business as usual. It doesn't affect anything that happens at the school, it's just used for collateral purposes. So it's on your consent agenda to just authorize that conveyance to the county.
So the extra pieces of property is enough to.
I don't think it's enough to do much about. It's just when these banks, issue the collateral, they'd like it all. So.
Just, I mean, if we were talking about building anything else on that property, it's enough.
I understand exactly. No, these are not significant. These would be smaller parcels and property lines or things that are identified after the fact. Yeah. It's not a whole new lot. I wish it
I was
was.
hoping.
Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
Next, we have Dr. McAllister with inclement weather update.
So as far as the update is concerned, as of February the 2nd, we had approximately 7 hours remaining for missed days. April the 27th, we have set that aside to use those days to do delayed 2-hour delays here and there. So we actually have 7 hours as of February 2nd to make up days. So based on that information, on February the 22nd, we met with the secondary principals to get their input and feedback in regards to any kind of options that they would propose for us if we had some inclement weather horizon. I looked at my weather today. I saw some snowflakes, I think, on Monday. So based on that conversation and their feedback, what they provided was option one was to use March the 30th, which is now designated as a holiday, to use that as a makeup day if necessary. Of course, we can change holidays to makeup day unless it is Veterans Day. So that's the first option that they proposed. The second option is an extended day, which would mean adding 30 minutes to the school day. The days that were provided for us was April the 9th through May the 15th, which equals up to approximately 26 days at 30 minutes per day. So of course, one day equals 390 minutes if we base it on 6.5 hours through elementary, because that's the lowest time that we have. Secondary is more time. So that would allow us to make up 2 days in those 26 days to use as inclement weather makeup days. Of course, graduation is June the 9th at 7 o'clock, and we know that seniors will not be available because they will graduate, so they will not be available on June the 11th and June the 12th. So again, options are March the 30th, change it from a holiday to a school day if necessary, and then incorporate the extended day as another plan on April the 9th through May the 15th.
So is this only if they miss a whole day, or is it if they miss, say, a 2-hour delay?
We have 2-hour delay, April the 27th, which is now a half day. We're going to start with that. So let's say, for instance, tomorrow it's a 2-hour delay. We'll take those 2 hours from the April 27th day. This time is to help us make up whole days if necessary.
So April 27th is early release?
Yes, sir.
Okay, gotcha.
All right. So just wanted to provide you all with that information.
And we'll communicate it to principals after. Do they vote on this, Chris?
They vote on actual changes to the calendar after it happens. It's just your office to get it out and communicate what the changes will be.
Thank you. Next, we have IT purchases on the right side.
Hello, good evening. Thank you for having me. My purpose here is simple. I have a recommendation for purchase that I would like to bring your discussion. And this is a purchase that exceeds the $90,000 threshold, which means the board needs to weigh in on the decision. What this purchase is, we have 480 Chromebook laptops that we would like to purchase for a total value of $168,974.40. We have gone through all of the required bidding procedures and established Trinity 3 as the vendor that we would like to award the contract to. And these laptops will be used in our high school and middle school 1-to-1 program for distribution in the fall. Pretty straightforward. Let's buy some computers with your permission.
And it's on the consent agenda, so
Thank you.
we'll approve it tonight and we'll approve the consent agenda.
Any questions?
So the computers they have now, are they just outdated?
Yes, ma'am. We give computers to freshmen. They keep them for 4 years, and at the end of those 4 years, they're retired. Sometimes we can reuse some for loaners, for testing spares, things of that nature. For the most part, we retire them.
So they take these home, don't
Yes, ma'am. And we do offer 35 wireless hotspots for students who don't have internet at home. You can check those out through the media center.
Thank you, Matt.
Yes.
Next, we have field trips, Melissa Ed.
We have 2 overnight out-of-state field trips, both from Asheville High today, and Miss Buchanan is here to share those with you.
Hey guys, we're requesting that our speech and debate team for Asheville High and Silsa be able to go to Washington DC May 25th. They would leave that morning and return on May 28th. That is a weekend, so what they would be missing is Friday of school, and then returning on that Monday, which is a holiday. And so that is for the nationals, and so it's qualifiers only go to that. And then also we're requesting to go on an overnight trip to Florida for another nationals tournament from June 17th to June 22nd. And again, that's for nationals and it's qualifiers only.
How many students?
It depends on how many qualify.
Oh, gotcha.
So it's based on their tournaments from before.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have our budget amendment, Charlotte.
Yes, you have the budget for 315. This amends the state public school fund for grants and other differences in allocations. We get revisions all during the year of our state allotments, so this will amend our budget to reflect those. And then it's just some line item transfers in the local current expense fund, so there's no increase in that budget. And then in Fund 4, it is a budget amendment to bring the lighting project that's funded by the Capital Commission Fund to the actual amount. And then Fund 10, it is to amend our Title I budget. Any questions?
So you happen to find every extra number?
Okay. Thank you, Charlotte. Next, we have Charlotte again with our surplus property report.
Yes, during 2017, we sold surplus property we no longer needed, in the amount of $5,750.25. That included projectors, probably some computers, screens, things like that.
Any questions about that? Next, we have donations by Ms. Charlotte again.
Yes, today we received a donation for $10,000 to the Asheville High School from Elevation Church. So that has to be by board policy accepted by the board.
I don't think there are any conditions on the donation, right?
That was nice, Ellen. Do what you want to do.
Yeah, I know, right? Thank you, Lord, you did possible.
So that money has to be used at Asheville High School
Asheville High School and for student needs, so.
and for student use.
That's fantastic.
Don't think it will give us a plan of this, so that we really that is. That's really good.
I know, it is.
It really is. I know, I mean, that.
Any other questions about the donation? Next, we have Chris with policy 4130, 4150, 4150.
I believe you've got copies of these in your packet. If we start with policy 4130, what we have done, and we promised you last year, about the time we would do it, is we made major revisions to the admission policies last year to get them in line with actual practice, procedure, best practices. Each year, the amount of students that live in the Asheville City School District and want to attend the Asheville City Schools grows. And that in combination with restrictions passed at the state level regarding classroom capacity and how many students per classroom, those limits, has caused the staff to look at them again and make sure that it's real clear for parents what the rules are each and every time. So the first change in 4130 is just a statement that we think this has always been the case, as is true with most of these changes, but we thought it would be helpful to let parents know. So that change is to state that the city schools will make a good faith effort to allow an out-of-district student who doesn't live within the Asheville City Schools, but is admitted to complete all grade levels in their assigned schools subject to all of our policies and procedures. However, parents should be aware that an out-of-district student is not guaranteed future admission at the school where they are initially placed or at any other school within the Asheville City Schools. By law, parents must reapply for a discretionary admission into the district every year. It's not something that's granted until they finish elementary or until they finish middle school. So each year, we'll see how that works in just a minute, they have to reapply. So this is just a statement of what the rule has always been, but we thought it was helpful for parents to hear that, because a lot of parents don't understand. Sometimes they think that once their child is in at the elementary level, they should be able to finish elementary, or that they should be able to finish through high school. So that's the only change in that particular policy. Excuse me, there's one other change. So if you look at the second page, paragraph C, this is where we talk about revoking a conditional admission of an out-of-district student. We moved this from the tuition policy because it didn't make sense for it to be in the tuition policy. And that's the statement that although conditional admission may be revoked at any time deemed necessary, we will make an effort to make those changes at the end of the grading period or at a time that makes good use of the school calendar, such as before or after some type of holiday break. So if we have to send a student back to their home schools of enrollment, back to the county or back to another county, we try to do that at a time that doesn't hurt the student.
Okay, just based on the difficulty we experienced last year. Is there a document that's included in the application for admission that parents sign that states just what we're going through, and it's signed by the parent, just so we have...
With these two statements in there, Melissa, if you'll make a note, let's double check the actual application that goes out, and we'll make sure that's there. Because you're right, that's the better place for this language, is parents are more likely to read the application than they are board policy. So I'll just tell you right now, we will make that change for all of these changes. We'll make sure that the application has a section that knows things, that it's a great suggestion.
And we talked about doing that last year and even highlighting. They saw it, so it stood out.
Exactly. Any questions about 4130?
The only thing, you made the statement that they're more apt to read the application than the board policy. So it says, good standards determined by academic satisfactory attendance, all that. So are parents going to know that those are some of the examples that could have them revoked?
And again, we'll make sure that's in the application, but I believe the application does say it's conditioned upon academics, attendance, and behavior.
Okay.
Yeah, but we'll make sure that anything a parent needs to know is in that application.
That'd be a real help.
Yeah, and that was
coming up.
Okay. Other questions about 4130? All right, if we could, let's look at 4150. What we did, the first change on page 1 is just an unnecessary sentence that didn't need to be there because we didn't go into what the rules are for every level later in the policy, so we're just striking that one sentence that was unnecessary. And then what you'll see, these were the big tweaks that we had to make just to make sure that everyone was on the same page. You will see at the top of page 2, these are the general criteria that apply to student assignment, student admission in district and out of district. So these are the general criteria that the administration follows. The first is we have a legal obligation to serve in-district students. Second of all, we have a legal obligation to maintain an ethnic balance, which is reflective of the school system as a whole. And that is the language that is used in the desegregation order is ethnic balance. So if you wonder where that language came from, that's where it comes from. And I do think it's important to stay consistent with that language. Number 3 is the efficient use of schools. These are general propositions that apply anytime we're assigning students. Capacity of a school or program. And what is meant by program is occasionally we will have students, for example, that may need an intensive classroom for behavior reasons. If a special needs student applies to the Asheville City Schools, they are not rejected on the basis of being special needs. We look at the program. And the test is, what do we have to hire additional personnel? What do we have to open a new classroom? We cannot do, and the law reflects that we're not under an obligation to hire additional personnel and open a classroom if out-of-district students were to create that need. So we not only do we look at schools, but we look at specific programs too. That's always been the case. Well, the ones we added, number 7, now clarifies that enabling a sibling of a currently enrolled in-district student to attend the same school. So at the time when parents apply, we will do our best to put siblings together at the same school if the parents would like for them to be at the same school for in-district students. So that is a preference in the hierarchy. Number 8, assigning children of staff at the primary school of employment. So this is a situation where if employees, for convenience, want their student to be able to go to their school where they work, there will be a preference for that as well. That is a convenience for these employees. I think the staff felt like that is 2 things. Number 1, it is a valuable recruiting tool for good teachers and other good staff in county and out of district to say your child can go to your particular school, and it's not that many. So don't think that this is some issue that's causing students to get denied at any major level. There aren't that many. Like the staff felt like we've done it before. Staff seemed to like it. It's a good recruiting tool. And then the 3rd change there is the placement of currently enrolled in-district students and Asheville preschool students. So what we are saying to preschool parents now is that for in-district students, we will try to give them a priority in placement. But for out-of-district preschool students, we cannot continue to offer any kind of priority. We just simply have too many students now coming to the Asheville City Schools. Did I say that correctly? Okay. It used to be that if you were out of district and went to the preschool, then you had I won't call it a policy preference, but there was an attempt made to keep you within the district. We'll do the best we can, but it's not a preference by policy. Okay. Next change is there at the bottom of page 2. We just simply now need to reflect the fact that we have choices not only at elementary school, but we now have choices at middle school and high school. So we've added the same procedure, the same processes at middle school. What that means for you board members is if there are more students than can be enrolled at SILSA, there will be a lottery. If there are more students wishing to go to Montford North Star, with the capacity of the building, there'll be a lottery. And those lotteries will be handled just like we handle the lottery in the elementary. The clerk of court, Steve Cogburn, will come over and supervise it. And we'll do a lottery with numbers and we'll notify the parents.
Okay, Chris, maybe I shouldn't bring this up right now.
Why not? We're having fun.
But, okay, this is back to North Star. Right now, North Star is not a school, it's a program. They don't have 100 students now.
The 100.
Why is it a school? Does it have a school number? It doesn't.
Yes, ma'am.
The 100 is what the state says they'll pay for the principal. That's what the 100 is. But it has its own school number.
I'm just saying because I know from in the past, we had to have 100 students in order for the state to pay
Pay for
for
the principal.
Yeah,
a
it's the
principal.
same thing. We just pay for it out of local funds. You're right, but we're just paying for it out of local.
But you don't have 100 students regardless, but this is what we're deciding we're gonna do.
Correct.
Okay, okay, I lay it to rest now.
But next year, there'll be
Sir.
160 students in the
That'd be
state.
good. That would be good.
Or more.
So on page 3, you will now see that we have clearly identified the priority criteria. And when you look over when I say this, if there is room for out-of-district students. It may be that several schools are at capacity, the classroom space is at capacity, and we can't admit any out-of-district students. But if we can, this is the priority we'll use for out-of-district students. Siblings, again, in the same schools. We make every effort to place siblings in the same school. Currently enrolled students and Asheville preschool students. So any out-of-district student will get, any current student will get priority over other out-of-district students. Number 3, currently enrolled students that are seeking a transfer, we work with those folks if they'd like to switch schools. And students seeking their first assignment then into the Asheville City Schools is last, is 4 in terms of the priority. So we want to just make that real clear, and again, we'll make that real clear in the application. Those are the changes to 4150. Any questions about those? Okay. The last 2 do not require your approval, but they go hand in hand with the policy, so we do not want these to be administrative procedures without notifying you and making sure that you're in agreement. The first is 4150. If you pull up 4150 and go to the second page, under paragraph C4, this is assignment of in-district students. And we have changed the wording there at the end regarding our waiting list to make sure it's clear that parents understand the waiting list. The waiting list will be maintained through the business day prior to the first student day. So right up until 5 o'clock on the day before school opens for students, we will be maintaining and placing folks according to a waiting list. As you can imagine, it is a domino effect, all kinds of comings and goings, and students showing up for the first time. The other reason we maintain a waiting list is, again, we have a legal obligation to serve any child that might move into our district the day before school starts. So the admissions office does a good job with this, but they wanted parents to know that's the end of the waiting list. Once school starts, everybody is where they are.
And that's another one of those things that needs to really be on.
Be clear. Yeah. You know, it may even be good to do as I think about this more as a simple Q&A for in-district parents and a Q&A for out-of-district parents. And just include that in the application. If you look at the bottom of page 2, for out-of-district students, we're clarifying a few things. This is the process for students that are already in our schools. They're out of district, they're already in our schools. This language was in the tuition procedure, which made no sense to me. So we're taking it out of the tuition procedure and added it to the procedure on out-of-district admissions. And it just lets parents know this again, is not a change in how we do things, it's just a change in where we've placed it. Then in April, the Office of Student Services looks at, sends out a notification about guidelines for current out-of-district students that are still enrolled as principals. Have they met the guidelines, Ms. Griffin? Is their behavior good? Is their attendance good? How's
You're
their
right.
academics? And the principal then says whether or not they think that student should stay in the Asheville City Schools. That information then comes back, and once that information is known, the Office of Student Services tells parents, you either need to come in and do a brand new discretionary admission and release application, or you need to enroll your child in your home school. I think that's fabulous that your administration does that ahead of time. So in other words, the folks that are already with us, they wait on us to tell them, do I need to reapply, or has my child been denied admission? And as board members know, any decision made under any of these policies comes back to you if somebody feels like they wants to appeal to the board. Under 3 there, again, that's under your procedure. It's the same thing we just talked about from the policy. We just wanted to make sure that it was worded the exact same way in the procedure. So that those priority for out-of-district students, or excuse me, in-district students is consistent with, no, excuse me, out-of-district is consistent with the policy we just talked about. think other than a few conforming changes, that's it for 4150B.
I saw where you added denial of student by the principal of any school applies to all Asheville City Schools for the entire school year. That was, thank you.
Yes.
Because we did have a situation where a student was denied at one school and was trying to go to another
Yeah.
school. Yes.
More consistent.
We learn more each year.
Right.
And then finally, it's 4135P. This is your procedure for tuition. And as you can see, it had a whole lot in it about student admission. So we have struck everything about student admission. And if you come all the way down to the middle of page 2, the new policy will simply start off by stating that policy 4130, discretionary admission, has to be followed. And that's the policy on admission of out-of-district students. I think that title needs to be changed, and we'll make sure that conforms. And I think the title now is discretionary admission of out-of-district students. And I'll make sure that meets the 4130 title.
Okay, so trying to get James a little extra money. Are we going up on tuition? We talked about it.
Well, again, I think the best thing to do there is just ask your superintendent and staff to take a look and come back with a recommendation.
So we get an increase in tuition.
Okay.
I think it's been years since we've done anything.
And that would be for
Procedures.
It did for 19.
Student services, yeah, it's got student services and this, that.
Okay, great. Get with me after the meeting. We may have a wording change or two, but again, those will be technical changes. So then we left in the part about tuition. And you can see we didn't change the part about tuition, except that we did add paragraph 3. It says, once admitted, continued enrollment of an out-of-district student is conditioned upon receipt of 1, a completed release, 2, a completed application, and 3, the payment of full tuition by August 1st of each year. So we are not accepting late tuition anymore.
Good.
The parent has to pay it by August 1st, and if they don't, then their student will not be admitted and will be told that.
Good.
Because we shouldn't be chasing down. The tuition's a reasonable amount, we shouldn't have to chase it down.
Unless we send Pat as a bill.
So those are the changes. Those are on approval, not as a consent item, but as an action item. The reason they're an action item is pursuant to your policy on policies, policy, I think it's either 42 or 4500. I'm recommending that, considering we are in the middle of admission season right now, that you go ahead and waive the second reading. These are conforming changes, your notices to parents. So I'm suggesting you go ahead and approve these on a single reading. And I'll say that during the action item. Okay.
That makes sense.
A lot of work went into this. I want to thank your staff. They have been at it for months.
Thank you so
You're
much.
good.
Thank you.
35.
Are we doing 35?
Yeah, and I think that's,
Oh, is that,
Mm.
that's Melissa?
I
Sorry.
think Melissa's on for that one.
You go ahead, Melissa.
Policy 3535, educational guest speakers and student assemblies. I shared some information about this with you at the last meeting, but we did not do an actual reading. So the hard copy that you have is the first draft for you to read of the revision to policy 3535. Just a reminder that we are the only district in the state with this policy. This was created here, and it had been a while since its revision, so we needed to make some revisions. We've removed all of the unnecessary language, and essentially gets down to the use of educational guest speakers can be an important component in citizenship education, and then all of the speakers must be approved in advance by the principal, executive director of teaching and learning, and the superintendent. That simplifies. Chris, do I need to read this word for word?
No, again, the policy is not very long. If you'd like to read what's left of the policy.
Would you like it read?
I think for the community, because this is going to be taken on the board meeting at 6:30, right? Or it's gonna be
It's not
read?
on the agenda, and I think the reason was so that the community could have maximum opportunity. So it'll be on a future meeting.
Next one.
So we have to have a first reading, right? And this, is this the first reading or?
I don't know that you would typically, and this is something we can discuss right now, typically your first readings have been in the open session, historically, rather than during a work session.
Right.
But we could add it to tonight's meeting as a first reading. That would be fine, because it still has to go through the second. That's up to you.
I would like,
You can read it in the first.
yeah, I would like to have it read just so that the community hears it.
Okay, and we could add that, let's see, probably the best place to do that is just make it an action item, make it C under action item, which is the first reading.
Do it and under the action item?
Yeah, just for tonight's purposes, since it's there.
Okay.
Normally it's an informational item, but since we're on policy, it makes sense to call through it.
Okay.
And Chris, who does that read aloud?
Who would you like to read it? Would you like to have Melissa read it, or would you like me read it, or which one would you like to read it?
Why don't you read it?
Since I'm already up there?
Just because, and you're an attorney. And, I mean, everybody knows you're the school attorney, and I think that's important for people to know that, you know, we are taking this seriously.
Sure. Yeah, we do.
Thank you.
Sure.
Besides, she sounds like she's gonna fall over.
And then with the procedure, there wasn't an existing procedure, so we actually created one that goes along with that policy for visiting speakers.
And I think you had said to Melissa and her folks, you got a procedure for field trips.
Right.
We should have a procedure for guest speakers. I think that's kind of what they're.
Right. Excellent.
Thank you. So finally, we have our public procedures, public comment procedures and update. So, we have a new form. Is it gonna be like?
Yeah, so we'll still give the same information. It was a whole page, and so we'll have copies of the guidelines for public comment, and then we'll have a one-pager that will ask everyone to state their name, place their email address, if they're representing a group or not, name of the group, and topic to be addressed.
And this takes place next meeting, this meeting, and next meeting's when it will go into effect.
On April 16th,
Okay.
if you decide.
And then we'll take this form up right before the public comment.
Because that's when it will stop, that you can add information.
Okay. All right.
Any questions?
I just sound like this. I wish I would do it tonight. But I'll wait till I get to it.
You got fried chicken, you can't.
I mean, I can't have everything. I
That's
guess.
right, you got the chicken.
Yeah, I do like it.
Any other questions or comments regarding the public comment procedure?
Excellent.
All right, there's nothing else. May I have a motion to go into closed session?
And we're being pursuant to 143, 318.11A1 to discuss personnel matters that are confidential pursuant to U.S. C.
May I have a motion? May I have a second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So moved.
Okay, the next is chicken.
Wait.
Oh, and I found the